Pasuk Dalin ends that the rains will come at that time. The earth will give forth its bounty. Veitza soda yite pirio. And the tree of the field will give its fruit. I mean, what's the chiddush? I mean, if you have a fruit tree, it gives its fruit. How is that somehow related that if you toil in my Torah and you're committed at this level, it'll be something which will border on supernatural, out of the ordinary. The Eitz Sod Yite Pirsa. So Rashi says Eitz Sod there. Hein Elone Strak. That even the non-bearing fruit trees, even they will give fruit. Lasida Lasos Peros. In the perfect world, meaning before the Chet of Odom Rishon, the sin of Odom, every tree was a bare fruit-bearing tree. If you go back to creation, what did Hashem say? Hashem said, Eitz pri, Oseh pri. Eitz pri, Oseh pri, ultimately was Eitz Oseh pri. There's no mention in time of creation there was a tree that was not fruit-bearing. It was only as a result of the Chet of Odom Rishon, the evil that existed within that fruit, that actually brought about a level of deficiency that now trees that initially were meant to bear fruit, they no longer bear fruit. So ultimately, in the perfect world, Rashi says, Asidin lasos, meaning in the future, at the time of Mashiach, where all evil will be expunged from existence, even the non-bearing fruit will give fruit. That's Eitz HaSodeh. Yitem Piro. That's the Chidush. And once mentioned, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, why did Hashem create night? Hashem created night, Legirsa. So people should study Torah. Because if it would be daylight, 24 hours a day, the person would actually work day and night to the point where he couldn't continue any longer. But at nighttime, that a person is forced to stop working because he's not able to due to this lack of light, as a result of that, he has now a choice. Do you study Torah during that time? Or do you go to sleep earlier? Or do other things? So lo ivro leilo el legirsa. The night was created legirsa. Girsa is learning Torah. It's more than learning Torah. It showed girsa means that it's shemaitza libed hilso. Learning definitive halacha. Understanding the Torah, the Gemara in a way where the end result is definitive halacha. That's what girsa is. We find the Gemara tells us in Tainus that Torah is compared to water. Besides psukim, we know without water the world cannot exist. Without water, in agriculturally can't exist, and the human being can't exist. Or no living species can live without water. Water is synonymous with life. Now, in the winter we say Saint Talamotor, Saint Talamotor, and we say Mashu Chamor Dagosha. We begin, it's the rainy season. The winter rains allow, when the earth is saturated and absorbed with the winter rains, now in the spring and the summer, all the produce, all the life grows from the winter rains. When do we have the greatest amount of time of Torah study? In the winter. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos that the one who does not extend his learning at a certain point, there's a claim against him. This is the what? When the days get shorter, one has to increase his Torah learning. You know, in the summertime, Tu B'Av is a holiday. Tu B'Av is a holiday. The 15th of why was that a holiday? So the Gemara gives a number of reasons. Gemara, tiny Gemara above Basra. Why was it a holiday? Because the Levium or the Kohanim who were Bali Mumim, who were blemished, they couldn't do the service, they would deworm the wood for the Mizbeach because the wood was dry and the worm had to be, if it had any worm in it, it didn't qualify to go on the Mizbeach. Because there was a mitzvah a number of times a day, Eish Mizbeach Tukad, they had to put wood on the Mizbeach to conceal the heavenly fire. It was a mitzvah saseh. So they would deworm the wood. On the 15th of Av, they would stop. Why would they stop? And it was called Yom Tavra de Maglo. It was called the day, the breaking of the sickle. And when they would break the sickle, meaning they would cease using the sickle, that was a holiday. So the Rabbeinu Gershom Bav says, what happened on the 15th of Av? The Kohanim who dewormed the wood, since it wasn't as hot any longer, there was moisture. And therefore, they could no longer deworm the wood, and they had sufficient wood, and the Kohanim and Leviim, they were able to get back to their Torah study. So that was a holiday. It was a holiday for Klal Yisrael that the Leviim and Kohanim could get back to the Torah study. That was called Yom Tavra Maglo, the day of the breaking of the sickle. Because now the sickle, they can't use the sickle any longer to deworm the wood. That was the tool. Therefore, it was a holiday for all Klal Yisrael. That was called Yom Tavra Maglo. The winter rains correspond to the winter learning, which is the most lengthy level of learning, because we have most nighttime hours available, and Torah's Mayim provides the physical water, which sustains existence. The rain will come in that time. Nosati gishmeichem bi'itom. Now it's interesting. It doesn't say nosati gishomim bi'itom. Nosati gishmeichem. I will give your rains. What do you mean your rains? I will give rain in that time. In its proper time, the rain will come. So what's gishmeichem? It seems to be there's a connection between, it's like a certain possessiveness. You have a right to that rain. You've done something which you earned that rain. So therefore, that rain is gishmeichem. That's your rain. Therefore, it's in a possessive context. When a person, you come to pick up your salary, are you just getting, you're going to get paid? Or you're going to pick up your salary, what's owed to you. The gishmeichem. Will be gishmeichem. And what level of rain what would this rain produce? The earth will give forth its bounty. Even the non-bearing fruit tree, it will bring about a level that even that tree will bear fruit, which was pre-sin of Adam. Because all trees bore fruit. It was only due to the evil, there was that deficiency, certain trees were chosen that they should not bear fruit. I asked the question then. Hashem says, "Eitz pri oset pri." The tree itself should be edible besides the fruit of the tree. And ultimately, the malach that was created to bring that about did not follow the instruction exactly. Because the Torah says, "Eitz oset pri." The tree produced fruit, but the tree itself was not edible. The tree itself. The only species of fruit, true tree, that the tree itself is edible, or is what the Gemara tells us. We find the esrog is called pre-eitz hadar. Pre-eitz hadar. So the Gemara asks in Sukkah, how do we know it's the esrog? Maybe it's some other species. I don't know what's the esrog. So the Gemara gives two answers. Either it's the word hador shador bi'ilo mishana l'shana. The esrog is different than any other fruit. It stays in the tree. It grows on the tree more than a year. It's from year to year. And Klal Yisrael is compared to the esrog. Why? every fruit tree only has one set of leaves. The leaf initially is there to protect the bud that it should grow to a certain point, and when the fruit is fully grown, the leaf dries and the leaf falls off. The esrog tree, you have the initial leaves, and after the fruit grows, it develops another set of leaves. You have two sets of leaves, initially and then afterwards. Hador mishon l'shon, because the Gemara in Shabbos cites a posuk that clouds are like ketapuach hasoder. We are like the apple of the field, tapuach. Because there was a story over there where Ravo was learning and was engrossed in learning, and while he was learning, he didn't realize his heel was pressing on his hand and he was bleeding. So a Sadducee says to him, or a Gentile says to him, question what the word is in the Gemara, I see you Jews haven't changed. Just as initially you Jews were compulsive and impulsive, that your mouth spoke before your ears heard. When you said Nasiv Nishma, your behavior is no different. You act totally irresponsibly. You're so involved, you don't even realize that you're actually hurting yourselves. You haven't changed. That's what this Sadducee or this Min, this pagan said to Rava. Okay? But over there, the Gemara quotes the Pasuk that Klal Yisrael is kitapuche asoder, or like the apple of the field. And just as the apple of the field it has two sets of leaves, it has the first leaf when the fruit develops and has a second set of leaves, we also, the leaf preceded the fruit. So Tosas asks, a tapuach, as we know, tapuach means an apple. An apple only has one set of leaves. So Tosas cites another pasuk which indicates that the esrog is also called tapuach hasodeh. And he quotes a pasuk, tapuach hasodeh or articha, has to do with the Jews in Egypt when the women would go out to the field and with the mirrors, and they would actually arouse their husbands and they would cohabit in the fields. That there should be a Klal Yisrael. So over there, tapuach means an esrog. The esrog, esrog is the tapuach hasodeh. The esrog has two sets of leaves. So similarly, we're like the esrog. You know, the only fruit that followed the order of Eitz Pri Osa Pri is the esrog tree. The only species. Because the Gemara says in Sukkah, how do we know? One indication, the esrog, the Pri Eitz Hodor is the esrog, because it's the fruit that stays from year to year, more than a year in the tree, and therefore it has two sets of leaves. The other indication is because the esrog is tam, it's called Pri Eitz Hodor, Pri Eitz. The Pri Eitz Hodor. Which fruit is Eitzo Shovel Apirio, that even the bark is edible to some degree, similar to the fruit that's the esrog. So it's interesting. Klal Yisrael is compared to the esrog that we spoke before we heard. The esrog is the only fruit tree that followed God's order exactly as it was meant to be. That not only is the fruit edible, even the bark of the tree is edible to that degree. I'd once mentioned that after the Malach, who was created to bring about vegetation, agriculture, didn't follow the order, Hashem should have destroyed the world, should have started all over again. It was not meant to be. I mean, there's another question. Does a Malach have Bechira? Does a Malach have free choice? That it could do as it pleases? A Malach was only an agent to fulfill what Hashem wants. So it's a separate discussion. But why did Hashem allow it to happen and Hashem didn't start all over again? So if you remember, we explained that when Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, and Hashem says, most tomus, when you will eat of that tree, the fruit of that tree, you will die. It means one of two things. Either you'll die immediately, or you'll be a species, a being that will be subject to death. Subject to death. but we find he didn't die immediately. Adam thought he meant die immediately, but ultimately it meant you're going to be subject to death. Before you eat, you'll be an eternal being. But now that you've eaten, you've compromised yourself, you're no longer eternal. You're subject to death. That's what it is. But the question is, if Adam himself was created before he ingested the evil, he himself was created pure. He had no handicap, so to say. He deserved the brunt of Midas Adin. Then death should have meant instantaneous death, start all over again. You will die. If he would have died, the world doesn't continue. God would have to recreate a new world. God's intent was he didn't want to create a new world. So God created him with matter. Adam is a composite of what? Of spiritual and physical. His body is earth. His neshama is spiritual, his soul. Nishmas chayim. So Adam was created with defective material. Why? Why was it defective? Because the earth did not follow the order as God instructed it to. Because it was Eitz Osapri, it was not Eitz Pri Osapri. So because he was already created with a defect, he had a defect from get-go, as a result of that, you could attribute his lack of clarity, or he was subject not to follow the order, because he himself had that deficiency, which the earth came about, had the same deficiency. That's why God did not destroy the world on the third day of creation. Let's start all over again. God always gives us that escape clause to be able to continue, because God wanted the world to manifest itself in this manner. That's what we explained it then. Ultimately, the end of time, where the world will reach its level of perfection, even the tree that does not bear fruit any longer, due to the chet of Adam Rishon, because that evil created that deficiency. Initially, the world was perfect. It was meant to be eternal, but because of the Ra, the evil, it put a limitation. There's limitation. That's called finite. Finite is limitation. At the end of time, there's no limitation. The tree was meant to, it no longer bears the fruit, certain trees. But ultimately, even that tree will bear fruit, because that deficiency won't be there any longer. Moshe Rabbeinu struck the rock. He was told to speak to the rock. He struck the rock. He was held accountable. I think Hashem says, because you struck the rock and you didn't speak to the rock, you have the ability to bring about a Kiddush Hashem and you did not. Therefore, you will not go into the land. Even your remains, your body will not be. You only be buried in Eretz Yisrael. The question is why. And as much as he invests Chanan el Hashem, he prays, supplicate Hashem. Hashem says, I don't want to hear about it. You're not going in. So if you remember, the Or Chaim HaKodesh explained, because if Moshe would have gone to Eretz Yisrael, he would have built a base of Mikdash. And anything that Moshe was involved in exists forever. The Mishkan was hidden away because Moshe Rabbeinu was involved with the Mishkan. If Moshe Rabbeinu would have built the base of Mikdash, the base of Mikdash couldn't be destroyed. And the Navi says the only reason why Klal Yisrael was not destroyed at the time of the Churban was because Hashem spilled out his wrath on Eitzim Bavonim, the stones and wood of the base of Mikdash. That's how the wrath of Hashem. So, as it says, Mishkan means Mashkon. Hashem took collateral twice. Rather than taking us, he took the first and second base of Mikdash as collateral. If Moshe Rabbeinu would have built the base of Mikdash, Hashem couldn't have taken that as collateral. He would have to destroy us. So the question is, why was Moshe given the challenge to speak or hit the rock? Hashem shouldn't have presented the challenge to Moshe, and he would have been able to go in. And Moshe is one of a kind. The answer is because Hashem wants there should be a Klal Yisrael. So Hashem created that setting of choice for Moshe, knowing how he would choose. He would choose to strike the rock. That would be the basis. He should not go in. And Hashem didn't want him to go in. But it just can't hold him out. It's all because you don't deserve to go in. Because you took the initiative, you made a choice that you don't deserve to go in. So it's all as Hashem constructs the scenario and sets the scene based on the way he wants the end result to be. The end result is the world has people have to have bechira. That why only God knows, and that's the way it is. The same idea. Initially, everything was supposed to be perfect, but since the world was created for man, and man's choice dictates how things evolve and manifest themselves, that's the reason why we have non-berry fruit trees. But ultimately, when the world will revert back to where it was supposed to be, everything's on a perfect level. There's no such thing as a tree that does not bear fruit. And the extra representing Klal Yisrael, which is it's Tam Eitzu Pirushobe. It followed it exactly. We have that level of representation because we are part of eternity to be resurrected and be part of that Olam Haba, the new creation in the 8,000th year. And Shira El Alayayin. Whenever there's Shira, it's always on wine. Where do you find it? The libations, the Beis Hamikdash. And the Karbonos, they were libations. It's wine. Only on Sukkot, besides wine libations, you had water libations. Every kosher bracha, every cup that you say a bracha, it's always on a cup of wine. So the fruit, the species, which ultimately brought the world down and brought the world to a finite state and represented the evil, which caused man to be limited to the ultimate level, the grape, the extract of that grape, that extract, ain't shir el hayayin. Whenever we sing God's praises, it's on that wine. I mean, despite the fact, so I think it is, as the Mishnah says in Brachos, as we acknowledge God for good, we say Shechionu. We acknowledge God for tragedy. We say Dynamis. That's in Shir El Hayayin. The grape, what does it represent? It represents the ultimate tragedy. It took down creation. It caused Adam to be driven out of the Garden of Eden. But despite that, we say Shir El Hayayin. We acknowledge everything is Hashem. It's all God's plan. If you remember what I had said, that the only meal offering, other than the communal meal offering of Shavuos, which is chametz, is the korban toda. You brought 40 loaves of bread were brought with the korban, and 10 of the 40 were chametz. So we asked the korban toda, the shtei alechem, which are brought on Shavuos, is a separate discussion. But why toda? Would you give thanks to Hashem? Why 10 of the 40 chametz? The others are all matzah, they're not chametz. So we mentioned, then the Sephardo explains, what do you say thank you to Hashem? It says, Arba chayav l'hodas. 4 people have to acknowledge and give thanks to God that you survived. You traveled the high seas, you crossed the desert, you were recovered from an illness, you were released from prison. So the Sephardo says, you only say thank you if you're a beneficiary of something. If a person is far from perfect, and there's enough prosecution that in the state of danger, you don't deserve to survive. And despite that, you do survive, you're supposed to say thank you. We're far from perfect. There's enough on our record to prosecute us that we'll put in a state of danger, we should not survive. The sea travel, the desert, the illness, or the coming out of prison. And despite that, we do. So even though this chometz represents chet, nevertheless, we give thanks. That's how the Sephardim, that's why 10 of the 40 are chametz, if you remember. I'd said it a little differently. I said, when you say thank you, what do you say thank you? Because you acknowledge that you're a beneficiary of something. And as a result of it, you don't take it for granted. It's supposed to be that way. It's only that way because Hashem determined it should be that way. If that's the case, you have to acknowledge and say thank you. Whenever we experience anything in life, things out of the ordinary. Today, most people recover from certain illnesses, or a good percentage of the population. So you can say, with modern medicine and this and that, even if you have recovery, it's natural. You recover. Are you singled out because Hashem wanted you to live? Even though you have unlimited numbers, is that a statistic? Or every one of that statistic, Hashem wanted every one of those people to live? Now, to acknowledge something as it is, why is it so difficult to see it the right way? You know, Shlomo tells us in Mishlei, Eved lo v'lishmalveh. If a person is a borrower, a debtor, you're indebted to the lender, because if the lender didn't lend you, you wouldn't have. So there's an indebtedness. You're an Eved, literally an Eved. As a result of that, whenever you acknowledge something that you're a beneficiary of somebody else, there's an indebtedness. A human being doesn't want to be indebted. I don't want to be indebted. I prefer to attribute it to something else. That's the way it's supposed to be. When you acknowledge indebtedness, automatically, now you're obligated. Person doesn't want to be a person of obligation. So if there's any way we could somehow see it through a lens that it's not indebtedness, and that's a challenge. When you bring the Korban Todah, you're recognizing it's Hashem's intervention. That's why you're alive. Despite the Yetzer Hara, despite the inclination to see it differently, I acknowledge it correctly, that I am a beneficiary, and therefore I am willing to be indebted. What's the indication? Because I'm saying thank you. Thank you means I acknowledge I am a beneficiary of somebody else's doing. That's what I'm saying thank you. Despite the comments that you don't want that, I do. That's why 10 of the 40 loaves are chametz. That's what it is.
I'm sorry, and the chametz represents the
evil inclination,
the desire to commit sin or something to that effect.
Correct. Gemara says it tells us the end of Ksubis that at the time of resurrection, it quotes a posuk, there's going to be something called Tal Techio. The dew, Tal is dew, which will bring about life. It's the dew of resurrection. What will be the dew of resurrection? That when mankind is meant to be resurrected, it's like when fish spawn, the male sperm of the fish goes on the eggs, and all of a sudden it's like there's an explosion. And you see, if you ever see pictures, thousands and thousands of fish all of a sudden come into being. The Torah is called Tal Techio. A person who studied Torah, that Torah will bring about a certain type of energy. The energy will touch the graves, and whichever person studied Torah, that will activate the person to be resurrected. So all of a sudden the earth will break open, and these people will come out of the grave as new being resurrected beings. That's tomorrow at the end of Shabbos. What's Tal Techio? Torah. Torah is Tal Techio. That activates the person who died, who decomposed, to be recreated, to be resurrected. Samar says, so what about a person who didn't study Torah? Like at Amoretz? Samar concludes that as long as the person somehow had connection to Torah, he assisted the Talmid Chacham to study, he was a Mazik Torah, he will merit resurrection, although he didn't study Torah. But as long as he assisted to some degree, the Torah should be studied, he merits this dew which resurrects him. The Gemara tells us, Shabbos and in Tainus, there's an underground water table. Now, the water table, it depends where you're in the world. It's at a certain distance from the surface. If it's closer to the surface, the earth remains naturally wet, and it's more fertile. So when it rains, the Gemara says when you have a droplet of water coming from heaven, from the sky, it activates the water table. That every drop, one drop comes, two come up from the bottom. Yeah. When it rains from Shemayim, from heaven, it creates a dynamic that the earth from subterranean gives out two drops. So every drop you have two. So you never have more rainwater than natural water coming from the sub well springs of the earth. You understand? The rain activates what's there below. Now, why does it rain? Because you study in the winter. That Torah activates, that's water. Torah is mine. That spiritual water activates the physical water. That's Gishmechem. So the Gishmechem, the more it's Gishmechem, the more that rain is attributed to you, the more it activates that special water that comes from subterranean. So it's similar to resurrection. We created the dynamic of that energy that comes upon the grave. And that activates the worthiness of that person that should be able to be resurrected. Something similar. That's what it's thinking. If you want to, we said earlier last week that if you observe the Shemitah, Ochel Kima Misbarach B'Meov. In the 60, you eat, it says you can eat the produce and you'll be sated. How are you sated? You just eat a small amount and it sates you, the equivalent of more. The less is the more. But how could it be? Right? So the answer is, as we explained, that if you have the bitochon, the less is the equivalent of more. You don't need the volume to sustain you. I mean, it's the same grain. If you don't have the bitochon, you eat that grain, it doesn't sustain you. If you have the bitochon, that same grain fully sates you and sustains you. It's the same rain. The rain rains, but when it rains, because it's gishmechem, due to your toiling the Torah, that rain is a different rain. It's the same raindrop. In the laboratory, you break it down, it's H2O. Whatever it is, same. But innately, in that rain, it's a different rain. No, the famous Gemara in Tainus, Reb Chanina Mendoza, his daughter-in-law, I mentioned the Gemara recently, didn't have olive oil for Shabbos candles. She only had a flask of vinegar. And she was a little down. How was she going to light Shabbos candles? So Chanina Mendoza says to his daughter, Hashem is gozel al Hashem shi dolek. As Hashem decrees that oil should burn, he could decree that vinegar should burn. And Reb Chanina Mendoza says, why don't you try it? And sure enough, she puts the wick in the vinegar and it burns. And it burned till Motzei Shabbos that you were able to say Havdalah on that flask of vinegar. But it's vinegar, it's not oil. The answer is the same thing. Hashem decrees the vinegar should burn, it burns like oil. The same droplet of rain. It brings about a result. It depends what Hashem decrees on that droplet of oil. It depends what Hashem decrees on that kernel of wheat. Does it bring blessing and fully sate you or no? You need that volume to sate you and to sustain you. The exact same thing. Okay, ready for the halacha. A lot of new things came to fruition this morning. Baruch Hashem. Okay. Lift up page 156. Tests. We had mentioned that at the time of the Gemara, a man would wear a ring that had a signet on it. You'd have to seal documents. It was called a signet ring. It's called tabashesh le'chosam. Chosam means a seal. It's a sealant. Lo yetzi b'tabas she'eno le'chosam. A man wore a ring only if it had something engraved on the face of the ring, because it was a signet ring. That is the type of attire that a man wears. But if it doesn't have that signet on it, it's just a smooth ring, then yotze chayev. Then you chayev, because you're transporting. And since that's called conventional transporting, wearing something on your finger, as a result of that, you're in violation of transport because it's not part of the attire. The Rashi potter. But if it has the signet on, according to Rashi, rabbinically, you're not permitted.
Rabbi, I thought we left off at. Wait, I'm sorry. Where are we? Yud Dalet?
Test.
I thought. Okay.
Page 156.
Okay.
Remember we spoke about the needle with the iron needle, not the iron
Yeah,
needle.
yeah.
That was
Wait.
ches. Now we're in test.
Okay, I thought we
But
did.
we left off at Yadala.
I thought we're up to
We
Yud
finished
Dalet.
the woman that was,
We did the Zav. We did everything.
Yeah. But I think we skipped this. I don't think we did it.
We did do this. Yes, I remember we did this.
We did, okay?
Yeah.
I think we skipped test.
Fine. Always
I
good
think
to-
test we skipped. We skipped test. We didn't do test. Jay, we the other ones we did do, but this we didn't do.
yeah, that's fine. No, you're right. I'm just saying yesterday we did Yadala, but as Rav said, we skipped tests.
We
Okay,
skipped a few. No, we
Oh.
skipped a few.
okay.
We skipped to Yud Beis. We skipped from Tess to Yud Beis. That's what we skipped. Okay, good. So, according to Rashi says, if it has a signet on it, rabbinically, you're not permitted to wear it. Rabbeinu Tam the Rambam mutter. According to Rabbeinu to Rambam, you're permitted to wear it. Why? Because it's the presence of a man. Deinu Tashid Elish. Because wearing a signet ring, that's a man wears that kind of ring. It's his type of attire. It's part of his presence. But something which is considered an adornment for a man and a woman, even the man should not wear it. Even though we have to understand. We said that why is a woman not permitted to wear jewelry? Because in the time in the Gemara, women, it was not unusual a woman would take off her jewelry to show her friend, even in public domain, and not realizing she may walk Dalet Amos. So as a fence, we say don't wear jewelry. As a fence to prevent transporting in Rosh Hashanah, public domain. So something which is a man and woman wears this kind of jewelry, even though a man may not take it off, but that falls under the category of jewelry that a woman's not permitted to wear. We don't differentiate man or woman. A man can wear, a woman cannot wear it. But if it's something which is unique, only a man wears that kind of ring, a signet ring, so that a woman is not permitted, it's a different type of ring. But if it's a type of adornment, whether it's a man or woman, and if the woman is not because she may remove it, even though the man doesn't, it falls under the category of jewelry that it's not permitted to be worn. You following? If it's something, let's according to Rashi, the Rabbeinu Tam the Rambam, a signet ring you're permitted to wear on Shabbos. Because it's a man's attire. A woman doesn't wear a signet ring because she doesn't seal documents. So it's not called a woman's attire. So therefore, it's something a woman will never take off because a woman doesn't wear that kind of ring. But if it's type of ring, let's say a marriage band that some men wear, and a woman wears a marriage band, and time at a Gemara, a woman was not permitted to wear a marriage band in public domain because she may take it off. So if the woman may take it off, although the man doesn't, but since it's a similar type of ring, even the man is not permitted to wear it for that reason. It falls under the category of jewelry that's not permitted to wear on Shabbos. Okay? Vayam comes in Shin Gimel Sif Yudches. Okay, let's see the Mishmur Tes. Sheno lechosam davi rak tachshit lisha. A ring that doesn't have a signet on it, that's a type of jewelry that a woman wears. Aval ish havi masui. For man, a man doesn't wear that kind of ring. So that's not called a man. So that doesn't adorn the man. Omari calls Eshotziu Kishu Munach Aletzbo. We're speaking about how did he transport it? He's wearing it on his finger. The way a woman will wear the same ring. Dibi Adomamosh. Because if he's literally carrying the ring in his hand, I feel the Eshla Chosam Chayv Kulyama. Everybody is of the opinion you're in violation. I mean, you're transporting a signet ring. It's not called wearing, right? You wear your jacket, it's called wearing. You take that same jacket, you put it over your shoulder and walk from domain to domain or public domain, that's called you carrying. That's the difference. So here the discussion is you're wearing the ring. Because if you be holding the ring in your hand, It can have a signet on it. That's called considered you're transporting. Okay. V'myotza chayov. Umikri derech hotzah al itzbo. And it's considered conventional transporting. So if you're wearing the ring on your finger, they shall form him nos the ish lebalo lichol uven musakno. Hear this? The times a woman gives her ring to her husband to take to the jeweler. So where does how does the husband transport that ring? To make sure it's kept safe, he puts the ring on his own finger. He takes his wife's ring, your wife's diamond ring, and you put it on your pinky. May that fit on the other, but put it on your pinky. So since a man at times he wears a ring on his finger, although it's not an adornment, it's only for the sake of transporting. So the man who wears the ring on his finger, which doesn't have a signet on it, since it's a ring that a man normally doesn't wear, transporting on his finger, that's called conventional transporting. Although it's not in his hand, it's on his finger. So since this is the way we transport it during the weekday, so with each wears the ring in that manner, that's not called wearing, that's called transporting. Okay? And Rashi saying this is the Gemara, what the Mishmur is citing over here. But you have the rationale. Mark, you have a question? Mark remembers the last time he took his wife's ring to Louis Glick to have it repaired or add a diamond to it. Okay. Okay. The Rashi Potur. But now the question is, a signet ring, which is considered a man's presence, are you permitted to a signet ring on Shabbos? Although it's something, so Rashi is Potter. He cites Rashi, rabbinically you're not permitted. Pirush, Potter avos v'jabonon. Dav tabash yesh lechosam hu tachshelish. He says, although it is part of an adornment, a man's presence, sheidarka b'chol lachtom bosh igoros. Because a man during the week normally seals documents with this ring. Because even for a man, rabbinically, there's a concern he may remove the ring. Like a woman removes her ring, a man removes his ring. But the Gozu he's under the same rubric as a woman. They don't touch it. But Rambam and Rabbi Tam say that this is only something a man wears. Since a man normally doesn't take off his ring, there's no concern he may transport in public domain. But something, it's a type of ornament which ornaments a man and a woman. We don't differentiate man or woman. It falls under the category classification. Jewelry that's not worn. Tasru gam leish. I have the comment Simon Shin Gimel Sif Yutches. Hainu Desham Nisbayer Hechlino Bozeb Manenu. How do we conduct ourselves today? Today, Tosa says its mannerisms have changed. People do not take their jewelry off. Even a woman, she doesn't take her jewelry off to show another person. Therefore, she's permitted to go public domain wearing her jewelry. Mashu Shom, the Limchos Bish had no say, Osam, Lushu Bikiveger, Kosusham, Global Nefesh, Yochish Latzmo, Shalotsis Tabas Kval. Person who's about Nefesh is concerned about his Neshama, he should not wear a ring in public domain.
But a woman could wear a ring, though.
I'm not sure about something. We don't make our own fences. You want to assume a chumrah on yourself to create a fence? That's fine. But let's say, before when we had watches, you didn't have battery watches. So there were times you're walking in the street and you look at your watch, it's not keeping time. You take off your watch, and as you're walking, you start winding it. Right? That's what people used to do. So if that's the case, even though you're not taking the watch off to show anyone, It's not the mannerism of a man to take off his ring to show someone else. What about it's a type of ornament? We'll say, let's say a watch, you permit to watch, because that's the presence of a man wears a watch. So that's not considered part of your attire. But let's say it's not unusual that a person goes, takes off his watch to wind it. And when you take it off to wind, you may be walking and you stop and then you start walking while you're winding your watch till you finally put it back on your wrist. Would that be a gzera? Or there we're creating our own gzera. Here, the gzera was because you're going to show it. Here, we're creating a new issue, a new concern. When you take off your watch, to wind it, you may not put it back immediately. We're creating our own fence. That's a personal fence. Chazal never spoke about that. They spoke of take off jewelry to show a third party. And since it's not the way of a man to do it, it's not a concern anymore. What about the watch? Take your watch off. So you say, good advice. If you take your watch off, make sure it stays stationary and wind it, put it back on, then start walking again. Know what I'm saying? I'll give you an example. A person wears glasses. You're permitted to wear glasses on Shabbos. You need it for. What about every once in a while? Sometimes you have to take off the glass. You have some dust on the lens. You take off the glasses and you lift it up and you blow off the dust. Very often you do it while you're walking, right? So you say maybe you shouldn't wear glasses because since there are times you do such a thing, you may end up transporting public domain. Chazal never spoke about taking off glasses to blow dust off the lens. So we say to a person, if you wear glasses, you have to be cognizant that this may be an issue. So if you do it, make sure to be stationary before you start walking again. Right? We don't create our own fences for that reason.
The Rav is recording. I don't know if the Rav wants to record or not.